Excuse me.
First off, thank you everyone for being here and attending for our first debate of the semester, our first QEP debate. As you all know, or just as a reminder, as part of our quality enhancement plan focused on ethical decision making, our students are asked to attend one movie/Netflix episode and one debate per semester. So this is the first debate we're offering. The topic is gender in sports. As we get started, if you can go ahead and take out your cell phones and silence them, please. And a housekeeping note, if you did not have a chance to grab a survey and something to write with on the way in, Kelsey is at the front and has those and can gladly pass those out. All right, as we get started, if I could have your attention, please, quiet now. Thank you. As we get started, I just want to introduce myself briefly. My name is Liz Hernandez. I'm the Assistant Dean of Students, and I'm also the Director of the QEP, our Quality Enhancement Plan. And tonight, I want to introduce our judges, then have our panelists have a chance to introduce themselves, and then I'll read the case and go ahead and get us started. For our judges tonight, we have Bill Purcell, who is a friend of mine and also an instructor in our MBA program and an attorney in Laurinburg. And we have Brandy Bullock, who's also a friend and an attorney in Laurinburg. And we have Nolan Gilmore, a friend of ours who is also a St. Andrews graduate and played lacrosse for us. And he's a reporter for the Laurinburg Exchange. And these judges are giving of their time and talents. So we very much appreciate them being willing to volunteer. At this time, I'd like to start with Team 2 with your student panelists and have them introduce themselves.
My name is Corey Johnson, and I'm a senior here at St. Andrews.
My name is Nina Havelka, and I'm a junior here at St. Andrews.
Hey, how we doing? My name is Eduardo Andrade, and I'm also a junior here at St. Andrews.
Hi, I'm Scout Maddox, and I'm a senior.
And our faculty.
My name is Nancy Phillipson, and I work in the Center for Academic Success.
My name is Kevin Phillipson. I'm a professor in the business department.
My name is Julia Scatliff-O'Grady. I'm in the Department of Communication Studies, and my pronouns are she and her.
I'm Tim Verhey, and I am the Dean of Students and also teach religion and philosophy.
Hey, I'd like to briefly read to you guys the case that's being debated tonight, followed by the questions. Then we'll have our coin toss to decide the sides that they're arguing. So tonight's topic is gender in sport. Many athletic competitions are divided into men's and women's competitions. One justification for this division is that men have a competitive advantage over women in many sports due to increased testosterone levels and muscle distribution. This is not to say that all men have a competitive advantage over women. Far from it. Still, many people think that the difference between men and women is significant enough to justify gendered categories, since this approach allows more people to participate and have a fair shot at winning. However, many people are now questioning this binary division between men's and women's competitions. First, we know that gender is more complicated than the distinction suggests. For example, non-binary people are neither men nor women, so they do not fit into either category. Transgender men and women, i.e. men who are assigned female at birth and women who are assigned male at birth respectively, raise questions for these categories as well. If we sort these individuals based on their gender identity, then some people worry. We risk giving trans women a competitive advantage over cis women, i.e. women who are assigned female at birth. Yet if we sort these individuals based on their assigned sex at birth, then we are erasing their gender identity, which raises further moral questions. We also face questions about what criteria to use to sort people into these categories, even for people who don't belong in them. In the past, sports organizations used genital check and chromosome analysis. However, these tests are both invasive and inadequate, since not all men have sex organs or defined as female, and many people, including intersex people, whose reproductive or sexual anatomy do not seem fit the typical definitions of female or male, have neither. There are also moral questions involved with requiring people to have surgery or hormonal treatment in order to compete in the appropriate category. Since we do not generally require healthy people to do such things, and since some people might not have the opportunity to take these steps even if they wanted to, if these problems prove too difficult to solve, we might also consider moving away from gender categories altogether. One model is that we place everyone in the same category. After all, there are different kinds of natural advantages people can have in sports, ranging from height to weight to testosterone levels. So maybe we should chalk it all up to luck and let the most athletic person win. But then the fact remains that men would likely have a competitive advantage over women in general. Another model is that we place gendered categories with, say, testosterone level categories and sort people that way. But then that might not trigger everything that traditionally gave men a competitive advantage over women in general, and it would also require a radical reimagining of many sports. So the questions posed are, is the binary distinction between men's and women's sports justified if not everybody is a man or a woman? 2, if the value of respecting a person's gender identity seems to conflict with the value of maintaining an equal playing field in sports, how should we weigh these values? And 3, why, if at all, is it okay for athletic competitions to sort athletes based on some features, such as testosterone levels, that create a competitive advantage, but not based on other features, such as height, that do so as well? So those are our 3 questions. So we'll now flip a coin to see who argues for that binary distinctions between men's and women's sports is justified, or against that the binary distinction between men's and women's sports is not justified. We'll let our judges call heads or tails. Heads will be team 1, tails will be team 2. Heads would be for, tails would be against. So it is tails. You want to see? So it is tails. Actually, you're right. You do get to choose the side. So do you want to argue for or against? You can have 1 minute. All right, team 2 is going to announce their position.
So we have chosen to keep it as men and women divisions based on birth certificate facts.
So they are arguing for the binary distinction between men's and women's sports is justified. So at this time, we have 5 minutes to prepare a response to the questions given their assigned side. Time starts now. argument, starting with Team 1. Team 1, your 5 minutes begins now.
Our responsibility this evening is to argue in favor of the fact that gender distinctions in sports should be done away with. And we will offer now several reasons why we think that is true. I want to start out with a little bit of history about gender and sports. In the early 20th century, and certainly in the 19th and earlier centuries, there were very few to no women participating in sports. It was assumed that only men were athletes. As time went by, we began to start seeing women enter into sports. They were often considered unfeminine and excluded for those reasons. As time went by, we got Title IX in the 1970s, 1972, I believe, and it mandated equality for men and women in all areas of education, including athletics. And I think that was a very important step. One thing that it brought about is changing our attitude towards women in athletics. Where once upon a time, athletics seemed to be the prerogative of men, we have learned over the last 40 years that it is also the place for women. And that women are doing more and more sports and doing them better and better. In fact, I saw an advertisement recently talking not only that women are good athletes, but that they preferred not to be called female athletes, but just athletes, because of their excellence at sports. I believe that as you can see the arc of history, you see our image of women and men changing in fundamental ways, such that today we see women as athletes and associate beauty and character in women not with being demure and passive and weak, but by being strong and athletic and engaged in the world.
Hello everyone again. As a scholar of gender communication, I'm trying to anticipate the argument of Team 2, and I just want to inform both you and the audience that gender is a fluid construct now. We are men, we are women, but we identify as such. Inside, we may have a completely different reality. So the binary is dead.
My position is, if you are truly an athlete and you compete with the spirit of an athlete, you want to compete with your best opposition, be it somebody that's a male or a female. I don't care if they are the best. I want to compete with them because as an athlete, that's who I want to beat. I don't want to beat someone just because that's who I'm.
As the mom of two girls, who are grown now, my daughter wanted to play baseball on the Little League team, and she was told no because she was a girl. We fought very hard for her to be able to play baseball, and she was as good as any of the boys. I also have a granddaughter who wants to play rugby. As a grandmother of a young girl, my first thought was, oh no, but she's very good, and it's a team sport, and she can hold her own. So I think that male or female, if you have the athletic ability, you should be able to play, and it doesn't matter whether it's male or female. But you should be able to make the team for the cuts, for whatever team you're playing in, just as any other player should.
All right, Team 2, you'll now have 5 minutes to make your opening argument, starting now.
All right, so we are arguing for the side that during sports, girls and boys should be separate, that the binary division is effective, and it is a very good thing to have. Science has proven in many studies that testosterone levels create an unfair advantage in sports. Obviously, boys naturally have a far higher level of testosterone than women, which creates this unfair advantage for us. Testosterone offers increased muscle size, aerobic endurance, decreased fat mass, and faster recovery times during aerobic exercises. So all of these things work against us as women in sports to be able to compete at the highest level with the highest male athletes.
I just want to go a little bit into like the consequences and what would happen if the other side was allowed to happen. Let's just say that we do have a third gender in sports and that we have, they're competing intermixing. We have to think of the consequences to go along with that happening. Along with, you have to think of how locker rooms are integrated because of that. How do you go about the process of letting someone choose what locker rooms they use when it's male and female? As well as there's also been a lot of cases of discrimination where people of transgendered gender don't get the appropriate facilities that they deserve, like the male and female genders. So when you open up the argument of letting third genders into pick between their sports, you're going into something where you have to know how to regulate the bathrooms or how they're going to use those facilities together, because a lot of problems can happen in those facilities together.
I want to go into the regulations and testing that is done currently now. So, for example, sports organizations, they will test women for the testosterone levels to make sure that there's an equal playing field between women, as well as the same would apply to men. And for this, to go into further detail, for example, if a woman has testosterone or if a transgender woman, so someone who went from a male to a female, had came and competed against women athletes, for example, in my sport, where I run track, then potentially she could win, and yes, that's great for her, but at the same time, though, it puts an unfair advantage on me for someone who I'm not just going to adjust my hormones to put myself on her playing field. So to do so, we already have these arrangements and potentially have put them in place for the fact of it equals out the playing field for the majority scientifically. It may not fit the certain outliers, and just like in every case, you always have outliers, but for the time being, for right now, we have to follow through with it, at least to fit the majority of people. Potentially in years, we can come up with different solutions, but for now, we need to focus on those. For example, like sports like baseball or softball, there was a question that came up that potentially what was the difference between the two sports and why did women in softball throw underhand? And one of the things that one of the and a softball player both agreed on was that a softball player cannot physically throw the ball overhand as long and as many times as potentially a male person or a male player in baseball. So we have to look at all sports across and make it equal for everyone. There are certain sports, for example, even like golf, that Corey plays, women can't hit the golf ball as far as men, and it has been proven for that reason. So women start a little bit shorter on the course than compared to their male companions. So we have to take all these considerations and look for the fact that we want to sit here and be fair to the majority and compared to those. We do want to fit the outliers, and we try to make it as equal as we can, but we can only be fair to everyone as much as possible. Thank you.
All right, each team will now have 3 minutes to prepare their questions for the opposing team based on the opening argument. Teams are advised to pose 1 to 2 questions. Your time to formulate your questions starts now. 1 minute. It makes it hard for the judges to hear the arguments that the panelists are making. I know you guys are excited, that's great, but if we could please keep the chatter down and not talk. So now, team one, you'll have, ladies, gentlemen, thank you. Team one, you'll have 3 minutes to read your questions to team two. Time starts now.
So my first question, I'm going to give you some background before I pose the question. But the question revolves around science. The topic of science came up that this is what science says. But science over time has been proven wrong. Years ago, the earth was flat, until scientifically and through exploration, we discovered it to be different. We also discovered that the earth was not the center of the universe. Everything revolved around the earth. Then scientifically, we found out that it doesn't. Gravity was not scientifically proven until it was. So my question is this issue of scientific evidence really something that is not yet proven, or is this another piece of science that is still changing?
This question is posed to Mr. Andrade, but I assume that everyone else on the team shares your sentiment. You mentioned that bathrooms and locker rooms might prevent any future gendered revolution. And back in the 50s and 60s, the same argument was made of African Americans and whites. And so we're wondering, what are you really saying here?
I'd like to ask a question that attempts to put your perspective into a historical and other perspectives. First of all, it's certainly over the last decades, women have gotten better and better at sports, knocking off all sorts of records and so on. How are we to say, given the short amount of time that women have been in sports, that if they continue in sports, they will continue to be stronger and faster and so on? Second question is, not all men are better at all sports than all women. For example, there are many women who are better at basketball than I am, right? Yet I like to play basketball. It seems to me that it would be appropriate to put me in a league with people of similar skill levels with me, whether male or female, rather than to artificially divide us.
Team 2 now has 3 minutes to prepare their response to Team 1's questions. Time starts now. respond to Team 1's questions. Everyone quiet down, bring the chatter down. Team 2 now has 3 minutes to respond, time starting now.
So I'm going to respond to Jorge's question. And so at the time he made the point to say that if you wanted to play basketball, that you should feel like you should be able to play against people your skill level. Well, as of right now, we can all go outside right now and play basketball, and we could all be out playing for fun or whatever. But we still allow professionally women to play in certain sports if they choose to. Your granddaughters are allowed to choose to play in football. I know a girl who was allowed to become the captain of a football team and play. In NASCAR, for example, there are women who drive against in a male-dominated sport. So we still have those options. There's not a law that says absolutely no to it. But at the same time, if you choose to play or you're choosing to go pro, then you know you should be at the skill level to match to what the competition is, to make it an equal playing field on that level of competition.
I'm going to talk about Dr. O'Grady's question, and I'm glad you brought up the 1950s because that's exactly what I want to prevent. I don't want injustice for transsexuals. I mean, we look at the segregation that was going on back then, and because of the segregation that was going on with African Americans getting put in to use some bathrooms and whites getting used to choose another, we could see the clear distinction of which one was better than the other. And I don't want transsexuals to be put in positions where they have unequal facilities to the other male and female genders. So I don't want that injustice for them because they're going to get less than par facilities. Again, you have to think about, if you really let this happen, all the changes in regulation from the law that you're going to have to go through all the states, and who's going to ensure that all these transgenders are going to have those good facilities? You got to think about who's going to put this, and they're not all going to agree with it, so I doubt that they're going to want to help them in that sense.
I'm going to address the point on science and how science is constantly changing. And you guys are totally right. It is constantly evolving, and that is the beautiful thing about science. Science, we're learning new things all the time. However, right now, where we are at, science says that testosterone creates a competitive advantage. So for us to assume that that might change in the near future is really, not worthwhile, because that's not where we're at the time. I'm sure it could even be proven if we allowed for women to, up their testosterone levels to match the men, we would see the impacts. I'm sure at the times of the Olympic athletes, all of their records would be broken and shattered by the increase in testosterone levels. So to say that it might change, that's true, but we can't base, this segregation on what ifs.
Time. Team 2 will now have 3 minutes to read their questions to Team 1. Time starts now.
Okay, thank you very much for the questions from Team 1. Very insightful. We have 3 main questions we want to direct towards you. Question 1 being, if binary division is dead, like Dr. O'Grady said, what would be a realistic solution to still allow an equal playing field for all? Question 2, what are the consequences of females playing in male-dominated sports? And lastly, question 3, if we allow females to compete in male-dominated sports, will they be allowed to adjust testosterone in order to make it more of an equal playing field and easier for the women? Thank you.
Team 1 will now have 3 minutes to prepare the response to Team 2's questions. Time starts now. 1 minute. We'll now have 3 minutes to respond to Team 2's questions. Time starts now.
I'm going to respond to the first question about if the binary division is dead, then how do we create an equal playing field? And I think you all, in your own comments, have begun to show us that by saying that there are women NASCAR drivers, there are women football players on male teams. These divisions are beginning to be broken down already as we see that women can compete with men in the same way. What we are proposing is that the artificial distinctions of gender not be the measure of who plays on what team, but that skill level be the measure of who plays on each team, so that we do not impose artificial categories on athletics, but merely the question of excellence, so that in the highest level teams, the highest level athletes compete against each other. The next level teams, the middle level athletes compete against each other. And in the lowest level teams, I get to compete against people who are equally bad athletes as me.
So, in the sport of rugby, I keep coming back to it because what I know best. Rugby is one of the only sports in the world that has exactly the same rules and equipment for men and women at every age level. There's no distinction. In high school, if a girl wants to play on the boys' team, her parents just sign a waiver saying, yeah, that's okay, and go and do it. If you want to compete, you can. We need to stop imposing levels of limitation on skill. If they have the skill, let them play.
We said that the binary is dead, and we want to underscore that while the binary in sports may be dead, binaries in and of themselves are still so beautiful. And when you think about athletics and binaries, there's so many things to explore beyond gender, like fast and slow, love and hate, soft, hard, all of these other binaries out there, and that's what we want you to consider.
I just want to end by saying, I have children and I have grandchildren, and my granddaughter competes in karate. There is no, they compete by skill level. She competes against her skill level, which is almost a black belt. That's what she competes against. Male or female, it doesn't matter. She's as good as any of them at that level. My grandsons, they play basketball and they compete on their skill level. They're not divided. They play, boys and girls play together.
Time. All right, both teams now have 5 minutes to prepare their closing remarks. Time starts now.
It's mid-range. I put 4 creams and 6 sugar.
Guys, quiet down, please, so we can hear the closing arguments. Team 1 will first have 5 minutes to deliver their closing argument. Time starts now.
We want to take back to that time in our ancestors' lives when we all believed the earth was truly flat. And we all believe that. And on the other side, we believe there'd be dragons there who would eat us if we went too far. And we're at a similar moment of crisis where change is happening, and we just hope that the fears that are inside of you can be replaced with the courage that it's going to take all of us to do the right thing. So we ask you to consider a world without the binaries that we've known and to explore what can happen in the future.
Science and experience are showing us today that what once was thought of as essential differences between male and female, between black and white, are not so much true as we once thought. And that the way that we have used those essential differences has been a way to exclude people from common life and society rather than to include them. We believe that sports should be measured by the excellence of sports, not by categories of gender or race or class or anything else. The excellent athletes should play against comparably excellent athletes. And people like me should play against each other too. That is, I think, the important lesson of equality for a changing world in which we find ourselves.
So someone who grew up in South Africa, where division was law, you were divided, there was no option. And I saw change happen. Change was inevitable. When I came to the United States, I realized in the United States, we label ourselves more than I've ever seen anywhere in the world. We're African American, we're Asian American, we're male athletes, we're female athletes. We need to stop labeling ourselves and just call ourselves, I'm an American athlete. I compete as an American athlete. Go to Canada. You don't have Afro-Canadians. They're Canadians. They got rid of the labels. Why can't we follow suit? Change is happening everywhere. We need to follow suit. We're simply American athletes. We're just athletes. We want to compete. Remove the labels and stop trying to say, you are different to this person, so you have to play in the sport. Just call us athletes.
So just to tie up everything, all we're saying is that if you're an athlete, if you want to identify yourself as male or female, but you want to play in any sport, you should have the skill level to compete. It doesn't matter whether you're male, female, you don't identify with male or female, who cares? You should be in that, you should be able to make the cut like everybody else. Male or female, play whatever sport you want to play, but you need to keep up with everybody else. You need to be as good as everybody else to be there.
I want to just add as a final conclusion that our approach solves the problem brought up earlier in the gender in sports. That it doesn't matter if you're trans or cis or anyone else, as long as you are an athlete, you participate with those who are similarly skilled as you.
All right, team 2. You'll now have 5 minutes to give your closing argument. Your time starts now.
Okay, to recap our entire argument, first of all, I want to thank the judges for being here. I want to thank everybody else for taking the day to be here as well. To restate the side that we have, we do firmly believe that sports should be divided between men and women and can only be classified for participation based off of what is on your birth certificate. With this being said, to put this into perspective, if you compare the two highest levels of sporting, so let's take, for example, the NBA and the WNBA. You're not going to put LeBron James on a WNBA team because obviously that would not be fair. Same thing with track with Usain Bolt as the fastest man in the world. And same thing with swimming with Michael Phelps. You're not going to put Michael Phelps up against the top female swimmer in the world. So with this being said, we do firmly believe that it should be divided between men and women based on birth certificates.
Going back to the science. Science has proven that as of right now, testosterone levels create an unfair competitive advantage. But to go back to the comments about science, what science has taught us is, for example, back in the day, we didn't know why we got sick, and we didn't know that hygiene mattered until we discovered the microscope, and we learned that germs exist. So until then, as of right now, science has been something that has been a proven fact, and we've always followed with it. And yes, maybe in the future, science will then change. But until then, until we have that proof that something has changed, that women have that opportunity to compete on a fair playing field with a man, until that has been proven, I feel like as of right now, we equally, all four of us feel, it is only fair to keep it the way it is as of right now. Because science has proven, as of right now, that testosterone has increased muscle size and increases aerobic endurance and decreases fat mass and faster recovery times for muscles for men rather than for women.
What I want to say is that in their perfect world, maybe there might be a third gender. But let's be real right now. This is not a perfect world. And people who make these huge changes are not always looking out for the minority in their best interest. And we need to make sure that we provide an equal playing field for everyone and not segregate people because of what they want. And look out for everyone.
So to wrap it up, we have to consider that not every sport can be played equally by men and women. In some instances, yes, it probably is easier to transfer and combine the genders. However, as Corey mentioned, in sports such as basketball and football, it's not as easily transferable. For example, if the Panthers are down by 7 and there's 3 seconds, do you honestly believe that a woman could throw the ball as far as Cam Newton?
Yeah. Yep.
All right, we'll ask our judges to deliberate and add up their scores. Then we will come to the judges' table for the announcement of their scores. Guys and gals. Then we'll come to the judges' table and have them announce their scores and give a few words. In the meantime, while they're doing that, please feel free to go ahead and complete your survey if you haven't done so already. And I'll call you back to order in just a few minutes.
Oh, Brian, really?
Are we friends? Thank you.
If you guys can return to your seats, the judges are almost finished. A couple of housekeeping items, just to remind you all. There were some questions about whether the QEP events are just for freshmen or for all students. They are for all students. All students are asked to attend a debate and movie each semester, so please just remember that. As you fill out your surveys, listen up. As you fill out your surveys, make sure that your name is on it. That's how we take attendance. At this time, I think our judges are finished deliberating, so I'm going to let Bill Purcell start it off, so if you can give him your undivided attention.
Thank y'all for being a good audience. It was really close. There you go. There you go. It was really close, but all three judges gave a slight edge to the faculty. The thing that was most impressive to me was the quality of the questions. Those were some of the best questions both ways. And the way we know that they were great questions is that both teams scored the weakest on the answers.
Brandy's got a few words for us as well. If you guys can give her your attention, please.
I think that both teams did a wonderful job. I really love what you said about removing labels conversation about Canada and about what we love about Canada. And so I thought that was fantastic. So I enjoyed that. Thank you.
And Nolan's going to give us a few words as well, so please listen up.
I'm going to kind of refer back to what Mr. Purcell said. The questions were really, I think, what made the difference here. I think one team was able to stick to their guns a little bit and not stray away from their argument, and that really was, I think, what decided it for me.
I hate to say this, but I'm a little bit shocked. But thank you all for participating. Thank you, our judges. If we can give our judges and our panelists a round of applause.